going to do a painting trip up the Birdsville Track from Marree for 500 kilometres until eventually I get to Birdsville. I will explain all about the Birdsville Track, and also I will give you some very handy car tips on the way. It'd be very remiss of me if I didn't explain something to you about tyres, especially in this country. And this country, believe me, is murderous on tyres. Now, this tyre was laying alongside this road. And when you look at it, actually it's got more rubber on than mine. But what has happened, he's run it underinflated. Now, that's the big mistake you can make in this country. What you should do, put your load on your car, then pump the tyres up to handle that load. But when you get into country like this, with a potential blowout in every stone, you need at least 3 to 4 pounds more pressure in your tyres. Because what you've got to do, you've got to get these soft walls here. These soft walls, which are showing here, and keep them up off the stones. Look, I'll show you here what's happened. Look at this, look. Look at that. How'd you like to be doing 100 Ks on that? It's only about a little over 1/8 of an inch thick. Now, what has happened with this bloke, he's got a star fracture here. See where I've poken my fingers through? That's through being underinflated and hitting one of these stones standing up, and bang, off goes the tyre. But also, if you look at this tyre carefully, we can see here that he's driven it underinflated, and all the inside is cracked. Can you see how all that split around? If he had had those tyres up to the pressure to carry the load, then say another 3 pound in weight, no trouble, he'd have gone on. And it would be a lot cheaper on the pocket because it gets very expensive when things like that happen. Now, if you get a star fracture, all is not completely lost. There is things you can do. Just a second. You can get, say for instance, one of these, a big patch, put out specially for these occasions. You'd stick that over the star fracture, pump your tyre up then to probably 5 or 6 pound more weight, because we want to stop the flexing. Now, by doing that, that will get you out of trouble. Would get you to somewhere where you could buy a new tyre. So what you've got to always remember, this type of country must have the right pressure. It's very, very important. Okay, that'll do. Remember, that patch goes on the inside of the tyre, okay? But now I've got a train to meet. The first white settlers moved into this country approximately 120 years ago, and really they were tough people. They had to be to survive in this country. From late in the last century, this settlement has been known as Marree, and really it's the supply centre for this whole area around here, for all the stations and for all this country. Today's the big day in Marree, Wednesday, the only day that the train comes now. In its heyday, there'd be 5 or 6 trains a day coming into Marree, but now only once a week, every Wednesday. And it's a big day for the people because all their goods comes in on this day. But the occasion is becoming so rare that I think they even stop the cricket match now to watch the train come in. Marree was first settled in 1884, and then for the next 100 years it was one of the great inland transport depots. But today the main job of the weekly train service is to cart away the steel back from the old northern line that once went to Alice Springs, and to bring up a few supplies. When you look around here, there is no way you could imagine the activity that would have been going on here over the last century. Look, for a start off, there was 1,700 camels and possibly 200 to 300 camel handlers with them. There was 85 people that worked here in the railway yards, transshipping and working on the trains, doing the things that had to be done. This was an amazing place. And today, look at it, there's no way. Can you imagine it? Can you imagine living out in this country, trying to run a property? No roads, no vehicles, and an Afghan turns up with a string of camels and says to you, I'm prepared to take you all to the market and I'm prepared to bring your stores out here. What a marvellous thing this would have been. The camels didn't need roads. They made their own pads over the sandhills. Marvellous animal. In fact, the camel is the only imported animal that really has fitted into the Australian environment. Let me tell you the story of this painting. Now, I've very importantly put in one of the Afghans that I consider was the most important man in this whole area here. He was the head of the Muslim community. His name was Bija Dervish. Now, he came from India, Pakistan area, as a relatively young man, with all the other Gans, as we call them. And this scene here, he would have done many times, bringing in, unloading the wool from the bush, and here's his mate here helping him. They're getting the camels unloaded. Then they would turn around and go into the outback again and bring in another load. Now, he had many camels, 80 or 90 camels they would work at a time. And in fact, one Afghan here had 800 camels. Can you imagine a team of 800 camels? Like, it takes 4 hours for them to go past one specific point. Just amazing. And I think this is what I'm trying to capture in this. And this sort of scene would have gone on many, many times. Well, there we are, the once famous Marree transshipping depot. I've got one last job to do before I leave Marree, and then I can be on my way. Good morning. How are you? Jack Absalom.
Dave, but
Hello, Dave. Look, I'm on a painting trip up here. I'm an artist, and I'm going up the Birdsville Track. Now, should I report to you?
Most certainly, yes. Yeah.
What, well, is this the reporting? Is this what
yes,
I do?
Well, we've got a sort of a set procedure we go through here. Get you to fill out this card. This is the Birdsville alert card.
Right.
Fill it out in duplicate for us. I'll hold one copy here.
Yeah.
I have a morning radio schedule with the Birdsville policeman. When you get there, drop the other copy in.
Right.
Then we can cancel our alert for you.
Very good. Of course, that's important. I never even thought of that. If I didn't report it at the other end and tore off somewhere else, well...
Next minute it could be police aeroplanes and big search and rescue looking for somebody that's not there.
Right, and I might get a good bill at the finish.
It's quite possible.
No worries, and all right, well, I'll fill this in.
Mm-hmm.
Dave, well, I'll go over and fill it in on the bonnet.
Right.
Okay?
Okay.
Birdsville. Via outside or inside? What do you mean via outside or inside track?
Well, the inside track's what we call the summer track. That's through Gorders Lagoon. It saves a fair few miles, but it's a bit rough at the moment. The outside track's the sort of main tourist run. It's the safest one.
Right. Yeah. Estimated time of arrival. Look, I won't get there till tomorrow sometime, probably tomorrow afternoon.
So put 5 p.m. Won't matter if you're a bit past your 5 p.m. schedule there, because I'll be talking to you in the morning anyway. If you're not there, then I'll start to get a bit concerned.
There you are, Dave. I think that's got the lot of it, mate.
Fine.
Okay.
No worries.
No worries.
Good.
See you later. Thanks very much,
Look
mate.
at your car before you go.
I know. I'm always very impressed with the efficiency and the courtesy of the police in these little stations in the outbacks of Australia. Even in this case today, you know, you come here, I'm work for him the moment I come, and yet he goes out of his way to be courteous, helpful. I don't believe the city people get the same service that we do in the bush. Farewell Marree, Birdsville, here I come. I'm on the Birdsville Track at last. 500 kilometres to Birdsville. Travelling here between these sand dunes, and in this part of Australia they run roughly north and south. In the times gone by, the mail truck would get bogged on practically every one of them, and in those days if he had a good trip he could do it in 3 days, but sometimes it took a week, and if it rained it could take 3 weeks. Today you do it in about 1 day. It's remarkable that the changes have taken place in this Birdsville area only in the last few years, just because of these graders and this stuff. This is the clay. Until they got this and topped the sand hills with it and wet it and rolled it down, you couldn't get through from Marree to Birdsville as easy as you can today. In the old days it'd take you 3 or 4 days, and if it rained it could take you 3 months. You didn't know. But today, 5 or 6 hours and you're up here. And this all happened because of a very important thing. Nothing to do with the station owners up here, the pioneers, but because we were going to have a car rally around Australia, the Reddicks Trial, and they decided that this road then was too rough for them to drive their cars, so they put a grader over it. Now once they done that, they opened up this whole country. Gone would be the cattle drives, because they could bring the transports up, load the cattle on and put them at the market tomorrow. Gone would be Marree, the railway line, because there'd be no cattle to shift from there. And gone would be the Afghans with their camel teams, because they could do it quicker now with the road transport. And this was all because of these graders and that here that's working here today. Dry. I thought I might have got enough water just to boil the billy, but it was only sand. This would have been a typical situation, to come along to a well, sand it up, no water in the bottom. There is water there, but you would have to get down and clean it all out. Now in this sand country, this happens all the time. You've only got to get 3 or 4 windy days, the sand shifts, water down underneath the sand. Now, this particular well was a very important one because the Natarani sand hills are only a half a mile back here. We've just come through them. Now, that was the hardest part to negotiate on the whole Birdsville Track. So to get here, you would have really accomplished something. The Afghan camel trains had to stop at this well. This is new well, and whether you were going up the Birdsville Track or coming down the Birdsville Track, this was a very important watering point. And really, when you got here, that's when the hard work started, because there could have been half a ton of sand in the bottom, which you had to clear out first. And then imagine having, say, to pull 10 buckets of water for each camel, and you may have had, say, 70 or 80 camels. That was hard work. I'll just show you how I make a little cup of tea. I always give it a tap on the side. That makes the tea leaves come loose, and then a half a cup of cold water, and they all go to the bottom. Guarantees a good cup of tea. In the days when this country ran sheep, the main produce was wool, and these marvellous animals could carry up to their own weight for many hundreds of kilometres. That is an interesting scene. But it'd be almost impossible to get that scene in Australia today, simply because there is no sheep in this country anymore. The dingo took care of that. The only people that have sheep now in Australia are the people down inside the dog-proof netting. Now, they are relatively safe. There's only an odd one gets through. But up here, just above us a little bit further, there was a very big sheep property called Cadillo Downs. Now, it was 15,000 square miles. And years ago, at the start of this century, they fenced that whole 15,000 square miles and tried to beat the dingo. Now, they didn't succeed, simply because they never had the equipment that they've got today. Excuse me, they'd only have a horse and a rider, and the dingo could outdo these. But today, with the four-wheel drives and the aeroplanes and good rifles and that, they could do it. But then they couldn't. And eventually, they had to pull the fence down and go to cattle, because they just could not handle the dingo. Tonight, I'll be staying at Mulca Homestead. The station these days is owned and run by Dennis and Gabriel Overton. Now, really, I was supposed to be here for lunch, so I don't know what reception I'm going to get. But these bush people, they seem to be more tolerant of people being late in the Outback. Anyway, I don't think she'll be too cross with me. So let's see what sort of reception I get. How are you?
Oh, this is a fine time to arrive for lunch. We're about to send out a search party.
Look, everything happens to me.
Yeah, big yarn.
I know, I can't help it.
I know.
The Overtons are the new breed of people that are filtering into this country. They were actually city people, but now they're coming to the Outback, and it's a whole new way of life for them. I think they'll fit into it very, very well. Gabriel, what would inspire anybody to come up the Birdsville Track and settle? Now, what I mean by that is, why not buy a place, say, between Adelaide and Gawler, where they get some rainfall and everything? Now, you can come up here and you could starve for 5 years.
Oh, I guess it's got history and it's a challenge. We've looked at various places, but anything closer to the city seemed almost like a hobby farm. You start looking at the money angle of it, and small spaces, smaller areas than we'd been used to. And I think it was, you know, a real challenge.
It can be a challenge, all right, up here, I'll tell you that. There's no risk at all about that. You've got some of the Cooper running in here?
50 miles of the Cooper.
Oh, that's good. Yeah. It makes a lot of difference, because you've got to have water in this country. That's it.
Well, when we came here, we couldn't believe that there was water as readily available as it is with the artesian water, and I think that's the thing that a lot of people don't realise, that we've got readily available artesian water just flowing out, and it has done for 100 years. All it means is controlling it. And that's Dennis's department.
When we came in, there'd been 4 years of drought. Pastoral land wasn't really in demand at that stage, and who the hell wants to buy it when it looks as bad as it did then anyway? So we found it was available and decided to make the move. We could see, I think the artesian bore we've got was flowing 15,000 gallons an hour and just more or less going to waste. So we thought if we could harness that or put it into pipelines and get it out over some of our country,
that's right,
we could virtually drought-proof the thing. We hope to, anyway.
Mulca Bore is really Dennis Overton's secret to success today. Now, this bore taps right down into the Great Artesian Basin, and the water flows out under its own pressure and very hot, something like 93 degrees Celsius.
Well, we're just trying to get water to all parts of our country. We've built manifolds so that we can run up to, I think, about 8 or 9 different lines off of the bore head. When it's fully on, it'll flow something like 14,000 gallons per hour.
One thing about the Overtons is that they're coming in with new ideas. They are now pushing the water out to sort of 4 corners of the paddock. They're piping it away from these bores so that the cattle do not have to walk so far for water, and they're bringing new stock in all the time and improving their waters greatly. In the first 2 years, Dennis has laid over 80 kilometres of polythene piping with this contraption he's got, just to water his cattle. And later on this morning, he's going to take me over to his neighbours and let me watch them branding their cattle. This is Mangarani Station. These cattle belong to the Oldfields. They've owned this property for quite a few years, and today they're marking and branding their cattle. Now, I find these scenes fascinating, and I can see 100 paintings here. I always get excited when I look at cattle working in a yard. I think this is marvellous. Just to see the catcher rope the calves and then haul them across to the rails. The whole scene of this branding and marking is all part of this cattle station tradition. In this case here, you have the son doing the catching and the father, he's doing the marking and the lads are doing the branding, the old and the new if you like. There's the other bit of new here also. It'll be very interesting to see how the Overtons approach this job in the future.
That's the introduction of Mr. Jack Absalom, and he's with Judd on the Mulker station today. Judd, would you like to perhaps ask a question from Mr. Absalom, and then I'll get the children to ask any questions after that?
Mr. Absalom, could you tell us about your life when you were a kid of 9?
It amazes me how things have changed for the children in what is undoubtedly the largest classroom in the world, which takes in the whole outback of Australia. But when I first went to the bush, we had correspondence, and in those days correspondence was very rough. You just had the reading, writing and arithmetic. There was nothing else. Over.
Catherine wanted to know whether you had made a camel stew, and is it in your cookbooks?
Well, there is actually a recipe for a stew in there, but it was a bit of a joke, and I haven't actually tried it because it needs 3 medium-sized camels, and I had a hell of a job trying to get them. Over. One could not help but be impressed when you watch the children doing their radio lessons, listen to the teacher talking to them. I mean, go back, say, to the 1930s. Everything was correspondence, and it had to come by the mail truck because that was the only communications these people had with the outside world.
All right.
Now, because that's a damper, or if it was bread or a cake or scones, you put coals on top of the camp oven as well because I want heat coming from the top as well as underneath. Now, I'm going to have a look at that in a half an hour. While that damper's cooking, there's another little thing I want to show you. Now, it wouldn't be very pleasant to get lost in a place like this, but with this stick, I'm going to show you a very simple way to find your direction. Put that stick in the ground, which throws a shadow. Mark along the shadow and put a line across the end of the shadow. Now, I'm going to leave that for 20 minutes, and then I'm going to come back and I'll show you a very simple way to find your direction anywhere, as long as it's south of the Tropic of Capricorn, the southern hemisphere. Probably the man that had more influence on this Birdsville track than anybody else was a chap by the name of Harry Ding from Yunta, the Dings at Yunta. And he employed a driver by the name of Tom Cruise, who became a legend on this Birdsville track. That is a part of the old Birdsville track. Today, I'm doing a painting of the truck coming over the sandhills. And on that sandhill alone, he would have got bogged 2 or 3 times, trying to get the mail through the communications up to this area. Tom Cruise would carry lumps of water troughing that weighed 100 weight apiece, and he would drag these up the sandhills and lay them on the sandhills and then put the truck over the top of them and then get them from behind and put them up in front again. Just an amazing man. Now, when I was here before, that was the shadow that I marked. Now the shadow has shifted to there. Now all I've got to do is put my left foot on the end of that one, my right foot on the end of that one, and I am facing north, in the southern hemisphere. Now I'm going to lift the lid off that camp oven. We'll see the proof of the pudding. Yeah, I think I've fluked another one. In fact, I'm going to have a slice of that with my morning tea. Oh, wouldn't that slay you? What's happened there would have happened to thousands of people many times. Come out, go to start your car, turn the key on, nothing happens. Now I suspect it is a loose terminal on the battery. So what I'm going to do now is turn the key on and hold it till I count to 10. And then, if I'm right, the battery terminal that is loose will warm up because it'll be shorting across. All I've got to do is put my hand on and feel which one's hot and which one's cold. Now, right, now that one's quite warm, this one's cold. That's where the problem is. I'll loosen this, take it off, and I'll show you a quick way to clean it. All I've done here is put a tablespoon of baking powder in about a cup of water. Now, all I've got to do is wash this off with clean water, tighten the terminals up, put them back. There we are. Now I should be on my way. I find all this type of country extremely interesting because it's part of the one belt of country right across Australia that forms our opal fields. If you went away to the east, you'd come to White Cliffs. Way to the west, Cooper Pedy and Andamuka. Now, had this area here been anywhere near any of those areas, like right up against them, it would have been mined years ago. I'm just amazed that nobody has come in here and sunk a shaft or came in with a bulldozer and did a few cuts to see if there was opal here, because I am positive there is opal in this country. It's identical, and this is typical of the breakaways of Cooper Pedy. As I get onto this stony ground again, I'm really on the edge of Sturt Stony Desert, and as we come up to Clifton Hills, the Birdsville Track is going to split into two. The main one is going to go straight up over the Gibber Plains to Birdsville, and the left-hand one is going to go around Goyder's Lagoon and across the Diamantina floodplains to Birdsville. There would be very few more desolate places than Clifton Hills Station, which sits on a hot Gibber plain. And could you believe it? The manager, Fred Wilson, has managed this place for 30 years. He must be an amazing man. You've been out mustering all day, mate?
Yep.
And how many did you get?
340 odd.
What, you're mustering all the time now, Fred, are you? Like...
Yeah, mustering, cleaning up to TB test.
And how long will you be doing that for before you finish that?
Next week.
One more week, yeah, oh, that's not so bad. That is an artesian bore. It's been drilled down into the Artesian Basin, the largest artesian basin in the world, which covers an area of 1,750,000 square kilometres. And it's because of bores like this all over this country is the only reason that the pastoral industry is here. Without these, they wouldn't be here. That is so hot, right on boiling point. And for that reason, they have to feed this water along this bore drain for often 1 or 2 kilometres just to cool it down, so it'll be cool enough for the stock to drink it. right from the top of South Australia, right into outback Queensland. Most of the stock are watered from the Artesian Basin, which covers 1/5 of the continent of Australia. Now, that's an amazing amount of water. You'll notice here now how the channel has gradually got wider. Now, this has to be because even a half a kilometre away from the bore, this water can still be warm. And look at all this bird life here now. This is marvellous. Without these waters, these flows in this country, you wouldn't have that. When you get off the main roads in Australia in the outback, you've got to be very careful. You must drive slowly because these station tracks can be very testing. And remember, you've got to be your own mechanic because there's no friendly service stations out here. In the last week or so, while driving around this country from the rough, stony plains to even to these sand hills, I have bottomed this car many times, and it just occurred to me that this is a very risky situation because I could easily knock a hole in me, the diff, the sump, especially the petrol tank. So I'm going to show you how to handle it when you do get a hole in your petrol tank, because this is very, very serious. Never get under a vehicle unless you've put something there to prop it up. How many people would be game to drill a hole in their petrol tank when they're on the Birdsville Track with no fuel for the next 500 kilometres? Only an idiot, I'm sure of that. But if I'm going to show you how to fix a hole in a petrol tank, I must have a hole. All we need is a cake of soap. Now, everybody carries a cake of soap and a knife as such. Now, just scrape about a tablespoonful of flakes off here. When you get them in your hand, then some nice dust or off your wheels, the bull dust, about the same amount, about a tablespoonful. Then put some water with this, make it into a nice strong dough, put it onto your hand like that, and then just lean under your car and bang it on. Now, that is all fixed up. There's a strong possibility I will get to Birdsville. But while I was under there, I noticed that the bracket that holds my exhaust system up is breaking away. It wants welding. Now, I can do this up the track, just a little bit further up. Come with me and I'll show you something special when you get welding done in the bush, which can be very serious also. Alton Downs, situated on a channel of the Diamantina River. I know the owner here, Bob Gaffney. In fact, he was one of the early ones up in this area. He came up when he was 15 years of age, and then when his brother died, years later, he took over the management, the running of Alton Downs. And it hasn't all been beer and skittles. Over the years, in 1974, in fact, one of the biggest floods in history, completely wiped him out, took away all his buildings, nothing left, and half the cattle drowned. But like most of the people in this country, he's climbing back again.
How are you going too?
You're looking younger. Listen, I had a little bit of trouble down the track.
Yeah.
Would you have a welding plant here?
Yeah, one over in the shed.
Marvellous. Can I use it?
Sure you can.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Go right ahead.
Yeah, no worries at all. Can you take me up and show me
You
what
sure,
it is?
Jack? Yeah,
No worries.
righto.
That's good. And how's things been going on the
Pretty
place?
good, thanks. Yeah,
Sure.
There it is, mate. Help yourself.
Ah, good. No worries. This is not very serious. I only want 1 inch of weld. But what I have done here, I've disconnected the 2 terminals on the battery. Now, this is very, very important when you're having welding done on a car. If you don't, there's a 99% chance you'll burn the diodes in your alternator out. Then you've turned a small problem into a damn big one. This is not much of a bog, and I will get out of this very easily. But let me tell you about a story of 2 people on this very sandhill here on Pandy Station, just a little bit below Birdsville, that didn't get out of the bog. After I've let a little air out of the tyres, all I've got to do is scoop some of this sand away. That can be very strenuous work out in these temperatures, over 50 degrees here today. And these 2 people that got bogged here and didn't get out, they pushed and pulled and dug this car for probably 2 or 3 hours, and they overexerted themselves. They were very distressed people. And when the station owner here of Pandy Station came along, he thought they were both dead, because one was laying on the front seat and the other one on the back seat with the windows closed. And really, they were cooking themselves. Anyway, he got them out and they said they were right and they were on their way to Birdsville. And when they go off, Mr. Morton thought, I don't like this, I'll follow them. So he followed them into Birdsville. And when he gets in there, they're having a beer and they'd calmed down a little bit, got a little bit more composed. But the wife, still a little bit distressed, she said, I'm going to have a shower now. You better have a shower too, dear. And he said, no, I'm going to have another drink first. I feel like another drink. So he picks up this other drink, starts to drink it, collapses, and a little while he was dead. Now, that should have never happened, because he should not have been exerting himself out in these temperatures. Should have put up a shade, a blanket or something, and put it up, got under it until the heat of the day had gone. Then get out. You can do this, but you cannot exert yourself under that. Because the thing that kills you out here is exposure from that sun. You have got to keep out of the sun. There's no risk about that. The heat up here in the summertime becomes quite overpowering. If the locals can't handle it, how could somebody coming from an air-conditioned office expect to handle it? As I come over this sandhill, it's quite a surprise to see Pandy Homestead laid out below me, and all the Diamantina floodplains and channels stretching out behind it. This would be my ideal location for a homestead. George Morton and his son David on Pandy Station here have always been very keen racehorse trainers, and I think it was handed down from George's father, because he did have very notable horses in Australia, namely Pandy Son, and Pandy Son won numerous races in the big cities, and from that I think the family's always had a tremendous interest. And even today George gives me the impression that deep down he may like to have been a trainer of racehorses and probably a station owner on the side instead of the other way around. Probably the most common sport or recreation that the station people right through the outback of Australia have is horse racing. Practically every station in the country have 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 racehorses. They put the horses in meetings at Birdsville and Marree and Broken Hill and all these places, and the main purpose of all this is to raise money for the Royal Flying Doctor Service. Now, this is their lifeline. The Royal Flying Doctor Service was called the Mantle of Safety, and I don't think there was ever a better name given to anything. The Mantle of Safety for these people in the outback. And of course they all support it, mainly by supporting the gymkhanas. This is the mighty Diamantina Channel. And when this floods, which is only when you get the big rains in North Queensland, but when it does, not only does it fill this channel, it floods out over this vast floodplain. And that road we've been travelling along, that would be out for, might be 12 months. And places like Birdsville could be isolated for a week or a fortnight or a couple of months even. When I came over that grid, at last I'm in Queensland, out of South Australia. And this sign is typical of most signs in isolated areas today. All they're saying is, make sure you carry sufficient petrol, sufficient water, call in at stations and advise them of your progress and your plans, and in the event of a mishap, remain with your car and you will soon have assistance. I can see by this country here, they've had a nice shower of rain, nice green shoots, and hello, I can see here that wild turkeys have found it already. And Struth, this is unusual. You've got wild turkeys on one side and a dingo on the other side of the road. In fact, I think the turkeys have just spotted the dingo. Before I go and quench my thirst, there's one very important thing I must do. Yes, here it is, the police station. Calling in at the Marree police station, getting a card off the policeman, filling it in was only half of the exercise. Now the other half I've just finished here. I've signed the blackboard in front of the police station at Birdsville that I have arrived, everything okay, end of trip. You must do this. Now that that's done, I'm going to quench my thirst. There's only one hotel here today, but in its heyday, Birdsville boasted 3 hotels and a much larger population than is here today. Hello, David.
Hello, Jack, how are you?
Good. Don't tell me you got no beer.
Oh, we've always got beer, Jack.
Have you? Good on you. Give us one. How's business? How's business?
Very good, Jack. Yeah, we had a tremendous season.
That's
yeah,
good.
150, thanks.
Okay.
So what have you been doing, Jack?
Well, I'm on a painting trip. I go away, you know, many times a year doing painting trips. This time I'm doing a painting trip and a few tips on survival as well, you know.
Sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Tell me, Jack, what would you do if you got stranded somewhere without communications, you couldn't fix your car, and you know...
Completely shot, you reckon? Yes, there's one thing I've still got up my sleeve. If you were in a very remote area, meaning it's very remote if anybody's going to come along to help you. Now, I'm broke down here. I cannot get the car going. It's an impossibility. It's too far for me to walk. And as uninhabited as all this seems, it's a station property in most parts of Australia. There could be a station out there, out here, out here. Now, I can't get to them, so I'm going to burn the tyres to send up smoke to attract them to me. So I've got 5 tyres and 5 tubes. I'm going to burn a tube in the morning and a tyre in the afternoon, because the station owner usually comes out of his homestead in the morning and has a look around for clouds to see if he's going to get rain. That's when I hope to get to him with the tube, and of a night time when he's coming home, I hope to get to him with the tyre. So that's what I'm going to do, and I'm going to try and get the hills to come to Muhammad instead of Muhammad going to the hills. See you next time. I don't believe there would be a station owner in this country that would not investigate clouds of black smoke going up on his property. he would have to have a look, because one of the dreads of this country is bushfires.